What if your brain fog, low energy, and lack of motivation aren't just about stress or willpower, but are actually ancient survival responses triggered by your gut? Most people think feeling stuck is just a mindset problem, but the truth is, your gut bacteria might be flipping switches that shape your mood, focus, and drive in ways you never realized. In the next few minutes, we'll look at how your microbiome sends signals that can either hold you back or help you break through. The real question isn't just what's going on in your mind, it's what's happening inside your gut right now. Your gut bugs are steering the ship. Most people don't realize it, but your gut microbes are quietly influencing your day-to-day experience in ways you'd never expect. It's not just about digestion. These trillions of bacteria are connected to your nervous system and can shape your mood, energy, and even your motivation through a system called the gut-brain axis. This network acts like a communication line between your gut and your brain, sending signals back and forth all day long. When this system works well, it helps keep you balanced. But when it gets disrupted, it can flip your mental state almost overnight. Let's break down how this works. One of the most important jobs your gut bacteria have is producing short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs. On a good day, humans make about 500 to 600 millimoles of SCFAs daily. That's a huge amount, and it's not just for your gut. These molecules help fuel the cells lining your gut, reduce inflammation, and keep the blood-brain barrier strong. The blood-brain barrier acts like a security guard, blocking out harmful stuff from getting into your brain. But here's the catch. Your gut bacteria only make SCFAs when you feed them enough fiber. If you eat a lot of processed foods or skimp on fiber, your microbiome can fall out of balance, a state called dysbiosis. When that happens, SCFA production drops, inflammation can rise, and your brain's protective barrier starts to weaken. That's when you start to notice brain fog, low motivation, and a general sense of feeling off. It's almost like your gut has a control panel for your brain. When the system senses trouble, it can put you into what scientists call sickness mode. You start feeling tired, unfocused, and irritable even. If there's no real infection, this switch is surprisingly easy to trigger. For example, a week of junk food or poor sleep can starve the helpful bacteria your gut needs. And if you take a round of broad-spectrum antibiotics, the effects can be even more dramatic. In rodent trials, about 40% of antibiotic-treated animals showed anxiety or depression-like behaviors afterward. While humans aren't rats, research shows some microbiome impacts may persist months after a ciprofloxacin course in animal studies. So, the changes in your gut can have a lasting effect on your mood and mental clarity. There's another layer to this story. What happens when the gut barrier gets weak? Dysbiosis doesn't just reduce SCFA levels. It can also increase gut permeability, sometimes called leaky gut. In clinical studies, elevated zonulin and IFABP correlate with higher IL-6 in depressed and suicidal patients. When the gut barrier breaks down, little fragments of bacteria can slip into the bloodstream. The immune system reacts by releasing cytokines, which circulate throughout the body and reach the brain. This immune response can feel like a wave of exhaustion and low mood, just like you'd feel if you had the flu, even though there's no infection. Picture it like this. You've just pulled an all-nighter, eaten nothing but takeout, and skipped your usual walk for a week. Suddenly, you wake up feeling like you've been hit by a truck heavy, foggy, and unmotivated. That's not a coincidence. Your gut bacteria are off balance, and they're sending out signals that slow you down. It's not about weakness or lack of effort. It's your biology, doing exactly what it's programmed to do. But there's a flip side. It's just as quickly as things can go wrong, you can often turn them around by supporting your gut. Eating more fiber, aiming for at least 30 grams a day, can help your bacteria bounce back and ramp up SCFA production. It means more fuel for your gut lining, less inflammation, and a clearer mind. Fermented foods like yogurt, kimchi, and sauerkraut can help diversify your gut microbes. Some targeted probiotics also show promise in boosting beneficial strains. In many cases, people see their mood and energy improve within a couple of months of making these changes. Still, this all raises a deeper question. Why would our bodies evolve to let gut bacteria have so much power over how we feel? Why would something as important as motivation or energy be tied to the state of our microbiome? It seems strange, but there's a logic to it. To really understand, you have to look at how these signals might have helped our ancestors survive. In other words, the way you feel when your gut is out of balance isn't just a random glitch. It's part of a much older system that once had a real purpose. The ancient survival mechanism behind feeling stuck? Think about the last time you felt completely drained, so tired and unmotivated that even simple things felt impossible. This isn't just mental exhaustion or a bad mood. It's a set of behaviors scientists call sickness behavior, and it's deeply rooted in our biology. When the body detects infection or inflammation, it releases cytokines, specifically IL-1 beta, IL-6, and TNF-alpha, that communicate with the brain, either by crossing the blood-brain barrier or signaling through the vagus nerve. The result is a predictable pattern. You feel tired, you want to be alone, and you lose interest in almost everything. It's not a glitch. It's a survival tactic. This emergency brake evolved for a world where infections could kill. The system's job was to conserve your energy and limit the spread of disease. If you weren't out hunting or socializing, you were less likely to infect your group and more likely to survive. Every bit of energy got rerouted to the immune system. In that context, feeling stuck or wiped out was a smart move. But here's the problem. This same system gets activated by modern triggers that don't actually threaten your survival. When your gut bacteria fall out of balance, say, after a week of processed food or a round of antibiotics, they can't make enough of the molecules your body relies on. The gut barrier weakens. In response, your immune system ramps up, releasing those same cytokines as if you had an infection. Studies show that cytokines such as IL-6 correlate with sickness, behavior, and brain inflammation in humans. The signals travel through the vagus nerve, and when the blood-brain barrier is disrupted, even reach the brain directly. Your body isn't fighting off a virus, but your brain acts like it is. You end up tired, withdrawn, and unfocused, classic sickness behavior, triggered by inflammation rather than a real infection. It's like your internal alarm system is set way too sensitive. Instead of waiting for a real emergency, it reacts to any sign of trouble, gut dysbiosis, lack of fiber, even chronic stress. The result is the same. Your motivation tanks, your mood drops, and you start avoiding things that used to bring you joy. This is how a simple imbalance in your microbiome can spiral into days or weeks of feeling stuck. The worst part is that this system isn't precise. It doesn't always know what's a true threat and what's just noise. Maybe your diet slips, or you lose sleep for a few nights. Your gut bacteria change, inflammation rises, and suddenly you're less motivated to exercise, socialize, or even cook a decent meal. Without those healthy routines, your microbiome takes another hit, making the cycle even harder to break. What once protected you now works against you, amplifying small problems into major setbacks. Modern life makes this cycle even easier to trigger. Processed foods, antibiotics, and constant stress all disrupt the gut and keep your immune system on high alert. Even minor disruptions, a single night of poor sleep or a stressful week, can set off this cascade. The ancient system that helped our ancestors survive now leaves us feeling stuck for reasons that have nothing to do with actual danger. But there's a key insight here. These feelings aren't just random or personal failings. When you feel unmotivated or foggy, your body is signaling that something's usually in your gut. Recognizing this shifts the focus from self-blame to problem-solving. You can start to experiment with your diet, manage your stress, or support your microbiome, and often see the cycle begin to reverse. Understanding this ancient mechanism is the first step. But it also raises a new question. If your gut can trigger these powerful changes in mood and motivation, what else might it be influencing? And are your gut bacteria always working in your best interest, or do they sometimes have their own agenda? The power struggle inside you, inside your gut. There's an ongoing power struggle that shapes not just digestion, but your mood, energy, and even cravings. Scientists now see that gut microbes don't always act as a harmonious team. They compete for nutrients, mainly fiber, and when fiber is scarce, certain species that can eat the mucus lining of your gut start to bloom. This isn't just a quirky side effect. It's a conflict that mirrors what biologists call selfish gene dynamics, where different players inside one organism fight for their own survival, not always for the host's benefit. Your daily choices play a huge role here. The average modern diet supplies only about 12 to 15 grams of fiber a day. far below the 30 grams or more that controlled studies show is needed to restore healthy short-chain fatty acid production. You don't feed your gut bacteria enough fiber. The microbes that keep your gut lining strong and your inflammation low start to starve. Opportunistic species, those mucus eaters, step in, using your own gut's protective barrier as their food. The result is a weakened gut wall, increased permeability, and a steady leak of bacterial byproducts into your bloodstream. This triggers inflammation, which you feel as fatigue, brain fog, and low mood. This isn't just a theoretical model. The feedback loop is real and plays out every day, depending on which microbes are winning the resource battle. If the mucus eaters dominate, your body pays the price with more inflammation and less mental clarity. If the fiber feeders have what they need, they produce SCFAs that help reinforce your gut barrier and reduce inflammation, keeping the system balanced. The food you eat isn't just for you. It's the currency that determines which bacteria thrive. Fiber-rich foods, vegetables, grains, nuts, legumes are the main source of energy for the bacteria that make SCFAs. When you eat enough of these foods, you're essentially funding the microbes that help you feel and function better. If you don't, you're giving an advantage to species that can damage your gut and ramp up inflammation. This power struggle in your gut doesn't just stay in your gut. It influences your cravings, your energy, and even your decision-making. Some strains of bacteria produce metabolites that can influence appetite-regulating hormones, nudging you toward more of the foods they use best. If you're already eating a lot of sugar and processed carbs, the bacteria that thrive on those foods can become more dominant, creating a loop where your cravings and your gut ecosystem reinforce each other. Over time, this can edge out the bacteria that keep inflammation and your mood in check. But this dynamic isn't set in stone. You can shift the balance by consistently feeding the right bacteria. When you increase your fiber intake to at least 30 grams a day and add in fermented foods, you help the SCF-producing microbes grow. It's like putting more energy into the part of your gut ecosystem that works for you, not against you. The result is a stronger gut wall, less inflammation, fewer cravings for junk food, and more stable energy and mood. Imagine your gut as an economy. When resources are flowing fiber and fermented foods, the businesses that benefit your health can thrive, and the whole system runs smoothly. When resources are scarce, less helpful players take over, and the economy falters. The good news is that even small changes in your diet can start to shift the balance. Over weeks and months, you'll notice less brain fog, more motivation, and greater resilience to stress. What's striking is that this idea that the gut holds power over the mind and mood isn't new. Long before scientists mapped the microbiome, some of history's sharpest thinkers were already obsessed with the gut's role in shaping who we are. They saw the gut not just as a physical organ, but as a key to mental clarity and even existential struggle. Their insights are starting to look a lot like what modern science is now proving. Nietzsche, Freud, and the philosophers who saw it coming, Nietzsche, Freud, and a handful of other thinkers were fascinated by the gut long before anyone had heard of the microbiome or short-chain fatty acids. Nietzsche, for example, made a pointed observation in Beyond Good and Evil. Section 80. The abdomen is the reason why man does not so easily take himself for a god. He saw the gut not as a minor detail, but as a limiting factor in our experience of life and clarity of thought. In his autobiography, Ecce Homo, Nietzsche described how specific foods and habits affected his well-being and mental sharpness. He paid close attention to how things like bread, meat, and even his daily routines could change his focus and mood. For Nietzsche, the gut was a practical reality, something that could make or break his ability to think clearly and live fully. Nietzsche's view went beyond diet advice. He argued that the state of our digestion could lift us up or drag us down, shaping our energy, our ambition, and even our ability to pursue truth. He believed that poor gut health could limit human potential, pulling us away from clarity and toward confusion or apathy. It's a perspective that feels surprisingly modern, especially now that we know how gut inflammation and microbial imbalances can sap motivation and cloud thinking. Freud, coming from a different angle, also noticed the gut's influence, though he saw it through the lens of his work with patients. Freud wrote about hysterical gastric pains, describing people who suffered real stomach distress without a clear physical cause. He saw these pains as a somatoform response, meaning the body was expressing emotional conflict through physical symptoms. Freud didn't have the tools to study inflammation or the microbiome, but he recognized that the gut could be a stage for psychological struggles. He was struck by how often emotional turmoil showed up as abdominal symptoms, even if he explained it in terms of repressed memories or anxieties. Carl Jung, Freud's former student, touched on the gut in his own way. Jung linked stomach problems to psychological development, suggesting that trouble with digestion could reflect trouble with personal growth. He used the gut as a way to talk about the challenges people face in integrating new experiences or dealing with inner conflict. Jung's approach was less about the physical organ and more about how bodily symptoms could mirror struggles in the mind. Even outside Western philosophy, the connection between discipline, the gut, and mental clarity shows up. Miyamoto Musashi, the famous Japanese swordsman and philosopher, advised his followers not to pursue the taste of good food. For Musashi, ascetic discipline around eating was a way to build both physical and mental strength. He believed that indulging in rich foods could weaken a warrior's focus and resolve. While Musashi couldn't have known about gut bacteria, his approach lines up pat, least incidentally, with what we now understand about how simple. Fiber-rich diets support both body and mind. These perspectives weren't isolated. Across cultures and centuries, people have sensed that the gut does more than just process food. We still talk about gut feelings, or feeling sick to our stomach when stressed. Ancient traditions often place the center of power, discipline, or imbalance in the abdomen. Nietzsche, Freud, Jung, Musashi all noticed, in their own ways, that the gut could shape who we are and how we feel, even if they explained it differently. What stands out is how these thinkers took the gut seriously, not just as a medical concern, but as a foundation for clarity, motivation, and resilience. They saw that what happens in the gut can ripple through every part of life, from our ability to think clearly to our drive to get things done. Their insights push us to look beyond surface symptoms and ask deeper questions about where our moods, energy, and focus really come from. If the gut plays such a central role, the next step is obvious. How do you actually use this knowledge? If your gut can shape your mood, motivation, and clarity, what can you do to make sure it's working for you, not against you? That's where things get practical. How to flip the switch back on if you want to get your motivation and clarity back. The first step is to address what you're feeding your gut. The reality is, most people aren't giving their microbiome what it needs to do its job. On average, daily fiber intake lands between 12 and 15 grams, less than half of what research shows is necessary, to actually restore the gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids. You need at least 30 grams of mixed fiber a day, including both soluble and insoluble types. Soluble fiber comes from foods like oats, beans, and apples. Insoluble fiber is found in things like whole grains, nuts, and many vegetables. Both are important, and your gut bacteria rely on this variety to make the compounds that reduce inflammation, reinforce your gut lining, and support a clear mind. Start by making small, deliberate swaps. Add beans or lentils to your meals, choose whole grain bread instead of white, and toss seeds or nuts into your breakfast. Vegetables should show up at every meal, not just as an afterthought. These steps might seem basic, but they add up fast. The right mix of fibers builds a more resilient gut ecosystem, which is the foundation for everything else. Fermented foods are the next big lever. Yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, and miso bring live bacteria into your system, increasing the diversity of your microbiome. This diversity isn't just a bonus, it's essential. A more varied gut microbiome is better at producing short-chain fatty acids and keeping inflammation in check. Even a few servings a week can make a noticeable difference. Studies show that adding fermented foods to your routine, alongside enough fiber, leads to measurable drops in inflammation markers. Some people look to probiotics for extra support, especially during times of stress or after antibiotics. Targeted probiotics like specific strains of Lactobacillus rhamnosus or Bifidobacterium lungum have been studied for their effects on anxiety and inflammation. They're not a cure-all, but they can help tip the balance in your favor, especially if you're already putting in the work with diet. Just remember, Not all probiotics are created equal, and results can vary from person to person. If you want to see exactly what's happening in your gut, stool tests can give you a snapshot of which bacteria are present and which are making short-chain fatty acids. Companies like BiomeSite or Viome offer these services, but it's important to know the limitations. These tests can highlight trends and guide your approach. But the science is still evolving, and results aren't always definitive due to differences in testing methods. Use them as one piece of the puzzle, not the whole picture. Keeping a simple food log for a week can be eye-opening. Most people underestimate how little fiber they're actually eating. Writing down everything you eat forces you to pay attention and makes it easier to spot patterns. If you want to get even more specific, blood tests for inflammation markers like CRP or IL-6 can show whether your body is in a state of low-grade inflammation, which often lines up with feeling tired or unfocused. The impact of these changes can show up sooner than you think. Clinical trials have found that within 2 months of raising fiber intake to at least 30 grams per day and adding daily servings of fermented foods, many participants report clearer thinking and a steadier mood. These aren't just small improvements. People who felt stuck for months often start to notice the fog lifting, better focus, and more energy to handle daily stress. The shift can be enough to change how you approach your work, relationships, and even your sense of motivation. Consistency is the real game changer. The gut microbiome responds over time, not overnight. Each meal is a vote for the bacteria you want to thrive. With steady effort, more fiber, more fermented foods, and targeted support when needed, you can gradually rebuild the system that shapes your mood, energy, and drive. Feedback from food logs, stool tests, or inflammation markers helps you see what's working and keeps you on track. This isn't about chasing a quick fix or aiming for perfection. It's about understanding the signals your body sends and making changes that support your best self. When you give your gut what it needs, you're not just improving digestion, you're unlocking a different level of clarity and energy. The way you feel each day isn't just random. Your gut has a direct line to your brain, quietly steering your mood, focus, and motivation. The more you understand and support this connection, the more control you have over how you show up in your life. Your gut plays a leading role in shaping mood, focus, and motivation. The microbes inside you influence how you feel and function every day. The good news is that your choices can shift this balance. Most people get only 12 to 15 grams of fiber daily. But research shows aiming for at least 30 grams mixing soluble and insoluble type scan make a real difference. Start by adding one more serving of fiber or a new fermented food to your meals. Small, steady changes build a stronger gut and a clearer mind. If you found this helpful, hit like and subscribe for more insights.